Welcome to Empowered Within, a soul-quenching, transformational podcast that will set your soul on fire through candid and inspiring conversations. Leading experts, celebrities, healers, and I share our journeys of how we've overcome challenges to living an empowered life from within. I'm your host, Jennifer Pilates. Welcome to another episode of Empowered Within. Hello, everyone. I am so excited for today's show. We are discussing everything numerology and the information it contains to our everyday lives, practical, tangible, and empowering ways with the Practical Numerologist Felicia Bender. Felicia is devoted to helping audiences uncover their life's purpose and so much more through numerology. Felicia is the author of Redesign Your Life, using numerology to create the wildly optimal you, as well as Master Numbers 11, 22, 33, The Ultimate Guide. Felicia is the resident numerologist for astrostyle.com and is featured in many media outlets, including Refinery 29, Women's Health, Elephant Journal, and so much more. Welcome to the show, Felicia. Yay!
Oh, I'm so excited, Jennifer. Yay!
Yay, I'm so excited. Numerology.
Day.
Oh, it is Numerology Day. And if anyone that knows me knows how much I love numerology and astrology and all of this great stuff. And what an amazing honor to have you in May, which for me is my birthday month. And also with all the interesting planets and retrogrades going on. So we're here to have so much fun today.
Absolutely. I'm super excited. And you're a May 7th baby.
I know. I'm so excited. And I celebrate all month long. So I've already started. So, yeah.
That is perfect. You're right on board with me. I'm like, it's birthday month.
Absolutely. Life is so short. We should at least have a month, especially after this last year, if nothing else. Absolutely. So Felicia, let's dive in. Tell me, how did you become this amazing expert numerologist?
Well, that's always the $64,000 question, isn't it? It has a long, winding road. I think like most people who end up doing something like this. My mother died when I was in my 30s, and it was a very catalytic time for me, as anyone who's experienced that at any time in their life, and especially at a younger time. And we had this kind of tenacious, intense relationship when she passed. And so it really spurred me on to this kind of spiritual gauntlet, is what I call it. I think many people who end up pursuing metaphysical, tools end up doing that from some kind of event that is difficult.
Absolutely.
So for me, it brought me into energy healing. I started learning everything I could about intuition, about healing across the board. And yet really, I'm a super pragmatic person, a bit skeptical, and in many ways, in a healthy way. And so there was a certain point to where I was loving all of this, but there was a tool missing for me. And it just so happened that I was in a bookstore, book flies out, like a Stephen King novel, not like the novel itself, but like a scene from a Stephen King novel. And it was a book that was not about numerology, because honest to God, the cosmic joke here is that I hate math, my most anxiety producing subject. So those of you listening, if you hate math and you're like, I don't even want to listen to anything about numerology. If I can do it, you can. And it really isn't math. It really is a language.
It really
is what I've noticed. And yet I was really put off by the whole numbers thing. And yet the book it was about something else, and yet it had some numerology in it. And I was reading it, and I just, on a whim, did the calculations and everything. And it was like a sledgehammer, cosmic sledgehammer to me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. This is so accurate. And I just started learning everything I could about it, because it was this wonderful tool that is from an ancient science, and yet it's also an interpretive art. So for me, it was really the tool that I needed to understand so many things and open so many things up for me, including my own intuitive language that works with that. Yeah. So that's how that happened. Short story.
I think that's an amazing story. And I love it because sometimes, even like you and I, were both intuitive, but sometimes you still want validation. I am a Taurus, so I'm always like, did I get that message? And numerology, and we were talking off air, you put out a monthly report that you send out to people's email, and it came before we knew we were going to do this interview. And I read it and I thought, did she send this just to me? It was so spot on for my life for this month. And it just validated again how amazing numerology is. Just by a number of the month, the number 5, the information that you gave was so impactful. I was blown away.
It is very interesting. And one of the things that I'll often say about numerology itself is that truly it's something that fascinates me. I think until the day I die, I will still be fascinated with it because it's so multifaceted and because I'm simply a translator. I'm simply an interpreter, and I'm perpetually fascinated at how it just never lies. Incredibly accurate. And it's almost, I'll speak with clients and everything, and they're like, oh, and I said, yeah, it's creepy, isn't it? How strangely accurate it is. So I love it for that reason. And I just think it's a wonderful way, again, as a tool, as a way for information, for validation, and for guidance.
100%. So a little bit deeper for those that are like, okay, you've hooked me now, but what really is it?
What is it?
Yeah, what is it?
What is numerology anyway? Well, numerology, there are different kinds of numerologies, just like astrologies. And if you weren't good at math, I don't know if you were paying attention in math class, or the Pythagorean theorem of geometry. Same guy.
No, okay? I actually tried to buy my way out of that class, truth be told.
I bet you did. You achieved that too, you blackmailer.
No, but someone nice helped me. But yes, no, I've never been good at math. So geometry was not my thing.
Not your thing. So, and for those of you who were, though, it's the same guy. He was a Greek mystic, and he basically posits the idea with numerology that numbers carry with them not only a quantitative value, right? Like 1 apple, 2 apples, and so on, but that numbers carry with them a vibration and a frequency. And so we can, at this point in the world, willingly suspend our disbelief here, go, because we are in the technological age, we do understand everything is digital, right, at this point. So it's a little easier kind of to wrap our brain around it, because it's almost, what is the cloud? Anyway, like where
is that?
Up there somewhere, but it holds everything. It contains all that data. How? We don't really, it's just mind blowing.
No, and we just allow it.
Yeah, we go, okay, yeah. Our cell phones, how does that work? The cell phone reception, all this stuff. So numerology really it's code. And we believe that we come in, you can use numerology for all kinds of things. More of my interest and my expertise is in how it helps us personally, because we can use our birth date and our full name as it's given on our birth certificate. And we can do calculations that can show up, each and every one of us, the cycles of time we're going through, what we're experiencing, what we're learning through that. We can have our personality profile. I call it our purpose profile. We'll talk about one of those key elements today, that life path number. That's basically what you checked in to do, and it comes from your birth date. But we can see how you're going to express that, what your soul's urge is, all these different aspects. So it offers this amazing roadmap to what you came here to do.
That is so interesting. Wow. You've mentioned a couple, but for you personally, like, what benefits has numerology brought to your life?
Oh my gosh. Just knowing my life path number, it was just, for me personally, and then for other people I work with, they're like, this is such a relief. Because often we always know intrinsically who we are, and yet mostly we're diverted from that. We're told that we're not that. We're told the expectations are something else. All of those things. So just even knowing my life path number gave me permission to actually do it, because I was doing it. Mm-hmm. And yet I was also really into some of the challenge points of it very distinctly, because with the numbers, you figure out, it'll tell you what the optimal is, what it's all about. And then because it's what we're here to do, it's going to be the most difficult thing for us to do. So we're going to have, some intensive challenges and obstacles that come with it. And to even pinpoint those in terms of just the thematic, just the wording, just the concepts around it, our guideposts. So whenever I'm feeling off track, I just go back to my keywords, right? My key themes about what I'm at, and it brings me back on track.
Oh, wow. Okay. So let's talk about life path numbers. How do we figure out our life path? How do we figure out who we are and what we're supposed to be doing here?
All right, here we are. So those of you who are listening, get out your pen and paper unless you can do it in your head. But I always say with anything numerology, just like if you're a carpenter, measure twice, cut once. So always add more than once, because if you're off one number, you're really off. Okay. You've given me permission to use your birthday as an example. So what you will do is take your entire birth date, and yours happens to be May 7th, 1973. In numerology, we are always reducing to a one-digit number, just as a heads up. And so how does that work? We're going to take the month, the day, and the year, add them separately, and then add them all together as 3 one-digit numbers. Okay. And little sidebar, there are different modes and different schools of thought about calculation.
Okay.
So this is the way that I calculate it. There are other ways. Again, we don't need to split hairs at this point.
So let's see if we come up with the same adding, since we're both such great mathematicians.
Absolutely. Okay, here we go. May, you're born in May is the 5th month, so that is a number 5.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty easy. And you're born on the 7th. Pretty easy again. That's a 7. Now it's going to get hard. Okay, you ready? I'm joking. 1973, 1 plus 9 plus 7 plus 3. 1 plus 9 is 10 plus 7 is 17 plus 3, 18, 19, 20.
That's what I've got. I'm using my calculator.
So you're using your calculator. Now you're going to go, well, but I got a 20. What does that mean? That is still a 2-digit number. And so you continue to add. 2 plus 0 equals 2.
I got that.
So now we're going to take all of those numbers and add them together. 5 plus 7 plus 2 equals 14.
Okay. Yep.
And then 1 plus 4 equals 5.
Equals 5. Which, by the way, 5 has always been one of my luckiest numbers.
Isn't it? And this often happens. Oh my gosh, that's my favorite number. That's my lucky number. That's a number that follows me all the time. So I get that a lot in the numerology verse here. And so again, we're going to be very simplified today. And yet I do want to mention that there are some numbers in numerology called karmic debt numbers, not death, but debt.
Yes.
And the 14 is one of those. So it adds just a really interesting depth and intricacy. There's a few more complex layers that go with your life path number and some windows of opportunity as well, the way I see it.
I didn't
We really won't do that today.
Okay.
We'll talk about the flat out 5, but just to have an awareness, there are some different elements that we get to work with numerology as well. Can get a little more in depth.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Wonderful. So I'm a 5. So now what do I do with myself?
So now what do you do? Okay, the 5. We'll start with the 5, and then we can talk about the other numbers just briefly, just so you have an idea, a brush up. Oh, very quickly, before we do that, for those of you who may be doing yours and you're like, oh, I got an 11 or I got a 22. Those are called master numbers. And we'll talk briefly about those. And yet those are considered, you keep those, I actually write them as an 11/2 because you would take 1 plus 1 equals 2. But those also have a different complexity to them. Just have that as a mental note if that's something you got, a listener, on your calculation. Yeah, let's go back to the 5, okay? Yes. So the 5, and as a reminder, the life path is what you checked in to do. It really denotes your purpose in life. And because it is your purpose, it's what you're really learning about. You're mastering, you're evolving into it, really. So it's going to take a lifetime.
We hope just one.
Yes, exactly. And because some people are like, when am I going to be done with this? I'm like, no, never. You're going to get the full spectrum of this. So the 5 is what I call the sensual freedom seeker.
Oh, yes. That's so me. Yeah.
Fun, fearlessness, adventure, The 5 is a catalyst. The 5 is the agent of change. The 5 is always forward moving. Great salesperson when it's something you believe in and are passionate about. The 5 is here to experience. Everything is an experience. It's a sensual, tactile lifetime for you. You are here to feel it, to taste it, to have sex with it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm in. So, hey, it is my birthday. Hey, it is my birthday on Friday. All right, Felicia, sign me up.
Sign you up. And so and that's the point of the 5 life path. It is this adventurous lifetime. So the beautiful thing here is that the 5 is this sort of frenetic energy. Oh my gosh. The 5, it lives what I call an ADHD lifetime. Like you have no filter.
100%.
A little bit of FOMO going on for you.
I feel like someone asked me the other day, they said, so tell me, when did your transformation begin? And I started laughing. And I said, which one? I said, I'm a cat with 9 lives. Like, which life?
With even more than that.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Again, spoken like a true 5. A 5 is always experiencing things. And you're meant to do that. And yet the key element for the 5, it's freedom through self-discipline.
Interesting. Okay, tell me more.
The constructive use of freedom. So if you think about it, we think about freedom and we're like, I want to be free. I want to do whatever I want, however I want. I'm just going to do all that.
Right.
That is actually just what? Self-indulgence. If you think about it. So basically think about this concept, which is a no duh, and yet not really. If you want, for instance, financial freedom, what do you have to do? You got to train. You got to get a job. You've got to have a profession. You've got to save. You've got to figure out if you're earning enough to have the kind of financial freedom you want. You have to have the discipline to do that. The result of that discipline is financial freedom. If you want good health, you're not just going to sit around drinking and eating and playing video games. You have to have some discipline. You have to have some routine. You have to all of that. So that kind of self-discipline again, gives you the freedom of health that you're looking for. So see how that clicks off all of the...
Interesting. Yes, I do.
The tendency for the 5 is more often in excess, in escape, self-indulgence, until you learn how to balance that, until you learn how to do that. The biggest thing for the 5 is focus and follow through, prioritizing. It's very hard for the 5 to prioritize because there's so many things, so many bright and shiny objects, and you want to do them all, and you give them equal weight. And so often it's cacophony of being overwhelmed. Right?
100%. I would say that's where I'm at this month.
Yes, indeed. Yes. So those are some of the key components. So when I look at the numerology, I would say as a 5, the most constructive, again, freedom through self-discipline, fun, fearlessness, adventurousness, agent of change. Those are some of the key elements. So always think about, though, when we're talking about numerology, that we will be challenged with the opposing forces.
Okay.
Because if you're learning how to be fearless, what do you got to do?
You have to get through the fear.
Yeah. You got to face your fears. You got to move through them. And so 5s have a higher level of fear factors usually. And often they're a little bit inexplicable.
Yep. Yes.
Yes. A little on that realm. It's again, so fearlessness, you have higher levels of fear. It's fun and adventurousness. I know 5s who hyperventilate at the idea of packing their suitcase.
Flying, especially right now, I have anxiety situations and in general with flying. And so the idea of being constrained in any way for that entire flight day. So my new thing, I have flipped my fear and said, and I've been researching for 5 years now, an RV. I'm ready for my RV. So I'm flipping it.
You're flipping it while you're moving it into what's doable for you. And I really am glad you said that about feeling confined and restricted, because if you're all about freedom, guess what?
Yeah.
You're going to spend most of your life, most 5s I know, always in some either very exaggerated way or subliminal way, feel smothered, restricted, confined, all of those feelings. And often with relationships, one step in, one foot out, one foot in, one foot out, one foot in, one foot out.
Maybe that's true. Maybe.
And yet you get to that point where it's been there, done that.
Right. Oh, 100%. If I've been there, done that, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I love about this whole, if it resonates with you and you're like, oh man, so me, you can come back to those key words and go, ooh, this is a fear. Is this a real fear? It's always a real fear. And yet, how do I work through it? Because it's important to work through it rather than avoid it.
Okay. So I just heard in my head, like, okay, if I'm having this fear of being constrained. So let's give even this last year as an example. My first thought, and you can laugh, numerous people laughed at me, is I said, okay, I need a house with a boat, with a garden, with goats, with chickens, with an RV, and either a private jet or a helicopter. I looked at it as that gives me all my means of transportation for an out, no matter which way. I can feed myself and survive on my own, and I'm a happy girl.
There you go. Nothing
like that's
really interesting. Even though we're just talking path today, also understand that there are other numbers. Mm-hmm. So sometimes also a really good thing to say is if when I talk briefly about each life path, if you go, man, that doesn't resonate with me. Understand there are other numbers that comprise your chart. So sometimes your life path is something you're really stretching toward, given your other propensities with your other numbers. And yet I would say also you have an 8, number 8 expression. It's like your rising sign.
Okay.
And,
like astrology. Okay.
And the 8 is money, power, finances, all of that. So you're thinking big all the time. A lot of people, but you're like, I want my jet, I want my goats, I want the whole thing.
I know. I want a jet and my goats and my chicken. I don't think that's a big deal. What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that to everyone? And yet that's a very interesting way that you think, that you perceive things and that you express your 5.
Okay. So I have to ask, I'm intrigued because now the same thing with astrology, and we won't go there because we're not that. But astrology also has thrown me off because of the math and the planets. But as you just said, the rising sign. Now, where did you come up with the 8? I'm just curious.
That's something we won't do here because it's much involved.
Okay.
It's taken from your full name as it appears on your birth certificate.
Okay. Did I give that to you? I can't remember. So I gave you a J, an A, and an R?
Yep.
Okay, just checking. Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's really interesting. So from the life path, there's another number and that talks about the years, like the 1 through 9 years. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That is the personal year cycle. So in numerology, we believe that we go through 9-year cycles throughout our lives, birth to death. I call it knowing the theme to your party because it's much more fun that way.
Love that. I love it. Yeah.
So again, knowing the theme, knowing if you're going to go to a party for 12 whole months, you want to make sure you're knocking on the right door and you're wearing the right outfit.
Exactly.
Right?
It's so important. Oh my God. Yes. Always show up a little more dressed than you need to be.
Yeah. And if not a little late. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly.
So.
Always 10 minutes late. Only to a party. Everything else, I'm 10 minutes early.
Exactly. Only to a party to be cool. So with that said, the personal year cycle basically, again, there are different ways of calculating this. The way that I do it, it runs from January 1st of every year through December 31st with a little bit of accentuation around your birthday and with a peak performance of it in September, just in your brain. And so those personal year cycles, again, they're truly an energy that you're feeling. And it's what's supporting you. And it also indicates the experiences that you'll be given during that period of time. So it's great to know your theme and to also know what the caveats might be or what the challenge points might be.
I love that. A little preview. You can prepare.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay.
And very briefly, the way it's a very easy calculation with this. So with you, it would, for those of you listening, and we will take the month, which is May for you, the 7th, which is the 7th, and then we will do 2021 because that's current year.
Current year.
So we're going to find out what the current year is. So 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 1 is 5. And remember, May is 5. The seventh is 7. So if we add that together, 5 plus 7 plus 5, that is 17. 1 plus 7 equals 8.
Another
So
8.
8 personal year, darling. So this is the beginning of a 3-year transition cycle for you. 3-year push time.
It's better than the last 3. No. The last 2 are pretty challenging, Felicia.
I bet. Last year was a very soul-seeking, introspective, break it wide open you're willing to go there.
Yes. I don't know that I was willing, but I definitely was dragged and kicked and screamed all the way through it. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. But yeah, it was a challenging year last year.
Yes, it can really open you up to some deep things that need reconfiguration, need healing. The 7 is that spiritual seeker. It's really asking you to step into yourself on its more evolutionary plane, no matter the lack of a better way of saying it. The 8 is a money year. It's about finances. It's about really looking at those and getting those in line in the way you'd like to. And yet overall, it's mostly about power and empowerment. I find that each personal year is going to trigger us in the area that is the thematic in what's going on right now. So in whatever level, whether it's relationships, whether it's your health, whether it's spirituality, whether it's whatever your key element where you feel a sense of disempowerment is where you're going to be pushed this year.
Okay.
Okay, but it's a testing year. The 8 is a tester. It's like boot camp. This is nonstop.
This has been nonstop. And I think how cool is it that the name of the podcast is Empowered Within?
Yes.
And that's what's launching this year. And that's been the big push this year. And then the relaunch of the clothing line. But that is talk about being in line with my number for this year with the podcast. I mean, that's so beautiful.
And then next year is a closing out time. So
I'm glad you brought up next year because it is a number that I wanted to bring up with you. So it's a number 9 because 9 comes after 8. And for our listeners, when you do dive deeper into numerology, sometimes the number 9 gets a bad rap for that year. I would like Felicia to help change that mindset a little bit because I know sometimes people look at it and they go, oh, and I myself originally did that a couple of years ago. Someone gave me a numerology reading and said, let me do this for you. And they told me that I was going into a number 9 year and it was not accurate and it wasn't a very good situation. I would like to help anyone so that they can empower themselves and do this themselves and understand the number and have a better thought process going and a better understanding going into it to go, oh, it's a number 9 versus.
My friend, the 9. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you are bringing that up in this way because I attempt to do that whenever possible because there really isn't anything that's ever bad. It's almost like Shakespeare. Like Hamlet, nothing's good nor bad, but thinking makes it. So yes, the 9 often does get a bad rap. So if you think about it, we look at the numbers 1 through 9. 1 is new starts, beginnings, I, self, ego. The 9 is the bookend of that. It's universal wisdom, compassion, humility, humanity, others, giving, selfless service. It's often in numerology known as the number of limited rewards. That in itself sounds so crappy. So I always make sure to go. And what that means is that during this year, you're going to be guided to do what you're doing because you can't not do it.
God, I almost feel like I'm in that this year too. How interesting.
You have a 9 in your chart. So there you go. You're in simpatico with this whole energy. So let's put it into context. And when it shows up as a personal year, let's give you why people usually go, because it is a year of completions and conclusions. This is a very transitional and transformative year and often what do we need for that? We need things to change.
Right. And change is hard.
Change is hard. People aren't really friendly with change. They want their life to change, but they don't want to change anything they're doing in order to get that. Right. So the 9 personal year pushes change. And yet the change that it's pushing is change that absolutely needs to happen. It's this kind of retrospective time where you're looking back and going, what's working in my life? What isn't? What has run its course? What needs to move out It's almost like Marie Kondoing your life. What needs simplicity? What needs to go so that I have room for what's coming in? The issue is during a 9 personal year, you often have to be in this liminal space for a little bit without knowing what's coming in. You got to let it go first. And that's super scary.
That's super challenging. That's the unknown. That's the fear. That's not necessarily a friend of the Taurus or number 5.
And yet the beauty of it is to learn the value of the 9 is always teaching us in its height and level, not to be too woo-woo or lofty about it, the real concept of that everything is temporary. Okay. The good is temporary. The bad is temporary. However we conceptualize that, right? So everything is temporary. And to really evaluate what's working and what isn't and allow it to and let go, surrender.
I love how you just described the number 9. Completely different from other explanations or the verbiages that I've read. So if I can ask a question about the number 9, because I know this is going to come up for somebody else that has looked somewhere else. And so there are a couple of things. And again, this stands out because of a situation that I had when I was given that number inaccurately in an inaccurate year. And it was all about major life changes, major life crisis, death. It was like what I read, like I literally sent me into a panic attack. And I will say I'm no longer, speaking with that person because they didn't understand what they like. You just can't drop a bomb like that on someone.
No, there's so much power in these words.
There really is. Yes. See, I look at it and I go, because I have to say when I thought about this and I thought, okay, I know I'm going into a 9 next year. So I have to ask Felicia about this because I feel like between the last 3 years, not even including what the world went through, I have had personal health crisis, family health life crisis. I've had death in my family this past year. I've had major upheaval in mood. You name it. So now I'm sitting back here going, Felicia, I'm a little concerned about my 9.
Here's my response to you, Jennifer. And it's this. The 9 is, especially when we're intuitively in alignment, we're prepping as we go.
Okay, love that. Understand. Yeah.
So you get it.
Got it.
Some people aren't prepping, and at the end, it's like a big sledgehammer. Often when you're intuitively aligned, you're prepping as you go, which doesn't mean it's still not happening. And yet what I want to say is when you're prepared, this is a year where dreams come true.
So it could be almost the culmination of all this.
It can be absolutely magical. And I'm going to give you a real world example. This is extreme. Okay. And yet it actually was. So I was teaching a workshop one time and a woman shared this who was in her 9 personal year. And we were like, okay, how's that showing up for you? And she says, oh my gosh, this year, this is the best year of my life. We were like 3/4 of the way through the personal year. And I was like, whoa, wow, tell me more. Because usually it's very tumultuous for people. And she said, she was, I think, in her 50s. She said, I finally got a divorce. I've been wanting to get a divorce for years, and I finally did it, and it was final. My son graduated from college. He has a great job. He's moved on. I feel so confident, and he's out and doing well. I quit my job that I've been wanting to quit forever. I moved to a different town. Here I am. I have no idea what I'm doing or where I'm going, and I am in heaven to see what happens next.
That is a phenomenal mindset.
And I was like, whoa. Rock on, because she was, if you think about it, even psychologically, those are things, divorce, move.
Those are the 5 major categories of driving you insane.
Yeah, major. And yet she was absolutely ready. Absolutely ready. So it's one of those years, Jennifer, where you can have been griping and moaning about your job for the last 3 years, and suddenly you get fired.
You're like,
you know what? You hate your job. You've been talking about leaving it for this long. We've been giving you time.
Yep.
Now we're going to do it for you. We're going to give you a
push. Yeah. I like that. Okay. So I also like the idea of what you said. When you're so intuitive, you are cleaning up some of that baggage along the way so it might not be so intense. And I'd like to say thank you now to God and my angels because they know that I work better that way.
Yes. And also it's a matter of really coming to terms with experiencing this kind of transformative change and being involved emotionally, because it is all emotional, and yet also practicing your spirituality. It's giving you the opportunity to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Amen. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So that's huge. Okay. So let's ask this, because I know I had mentioned to a couple of people that I was bringing you on, and they're like, you know, the questions that they wanted to know. When are we more likely to get married and or get into a serious relationship if maybe marriage isn't in that person's cards? Who knows? But they're like, when does that happen?
What I also am very clear about is it can happen any year. Okay? Any year. And yet numerologically, the energy is very supportive of relationships in that way, in a number 2 personal year and a number 6 personal year. The 6 is known as the marriage and divorce time.
Interesting.
So it's if you're upping the commitment level, upping the ante in a 6 personal year, or recommitting if you're in one, or if it's been hovering on maybe not, then it's often a time where you decide to call it quits. The 2 and the 6 are very relationship centered and relationship focused, often a time where you will find your one, up level to an engagement or a marriage, depending on where you are.
Very cool. Okay. So am I considered in the business financial years? Is that where the 8, 9 is?
Yes. The
Okay.
8.
The
really.
8.
And yet I also want to say that sometimes there are so many nuances, right? And it's impossible to talk about all of them. Yet I find that it's very much about money, but to me, in my experience, it's mostly at the get-go about empowerment. So if you're really struggling with the empowerment part, you have to clean that up first. Before you get
it's truly that was last year into this year. And then it was like, once the light switch went on, look out, here she comes.
Yes. Yes. And again, you have an 8 in your chart. So you have some connective tissue here, some ongoing themes that I'm sure that you work with in life. Yeah.
Definitely. How interesting. Okay. So let me ask you this, Felicia. What is the biggest aha moment you've had when it comes to numerology and your...
Oh, that's a tough one. There's a lot of them. And yet in my own life or in my experience with others, because it really is an incredible tool for me to understand my loved ones and all of that. And yet I'll just leave that over there for a moment.
Sure.
I think for me, I had a very challenging, let's put it that way. I'm trying to get the word
right.
It would be best, almost 7 years ago. And it really kicked me to the curb. And I knew that I was in a huge transition period, changing cycles, not only personal year cycle, but there's also something called a pinnacle cycle in numerology. And I was shifting into my 4th and final one. And my 4th and final one is an 8. And that is really giving you a lot of tests, accelerated tests in power, in money, and all of this stuff. And I was getting it all. And honest to goodness, would literally be almost on my knees crying, but it was a laugh cry.
I can't believe this is happening. Like what?
No, because I knew why it was happening. I knew why. And I knew that when I made it through that, standing up and standing strong, that I literally could do anything.
That is amazing.
And if I didn't have that information in front of me and that it really made sense to me and resonated, I could have really gone other directions.
The similarities between numerology and astrology, they're similar yet very different. They may deliver the same message, but in different ways. So you may resonate with one more than the other.
Very complementary is what it is. Yeah.
Very complimentary. And I love the let's be prepared. We should know what's coming. If we know a Mercury in retrograde is coming at the end of this month, oh, by the way, we know to watch out for our cars, our computers, our communication. It's just, again, goes back to knowledge is power. And then when the computer goes on the blink, it's not that big of a deal because it's part of the process and you're going to move through it.
Yeah. And you can I find that those are times when you actually get humor out of it.
What's really funny now that you say that is on Sunday, I went out to get in my car and it looked like the whole electrical was fried. I was like, oh my, because I've been in a car when a battery died before. And I was like, it doesn't look like this. It doesn't feel like this. And I was trying to keep myself even keeled. But if I had only thought in that moment, of which I didn't, that Mercury is going into retrograde at the end of the month and our energies are already pooling, I would have giggled and went, it really is just the battery. Thank goodness it ended up being just the battery. But now that you're saying this, it's all that stuff that sometimes, as much as, and I know, and our listeners, as being an intuitive, an empath, a psychic, a human being, sometimes we just get pulled into the rabbit hole, and we have to remember to take a minute, breathe, and then find that grounding point, whatever that is, and bring it back to the numerology or the astrology or whatever is grounding, to go, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And to trust, really, that's a big one. Flow, and to have that interesting level of allowance and action.
100%.
To do that right action, and yet allow the flow and allow things to allow.
Right. To find the flow, to be comfortable with flowing, to find the alignment in the flow. It's always an ebb and flow. You're always working on those things.
Yes, there are. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. You've educated me further in my numerology love and education and insightfulness with everything that you've brought forth today. For our listeners that would like to reach out and connect with you more, have their own private one-on-one numerology with you, or I know you also offer courses, where can our listeners find you and reach out?
You can find me on my website. It's FeliciaBender.com. And I'm, of course, on Instagram and Facebook, and also on YouTube. So you can have there's some video there, and you can get that through my website as well.
Wonderful. Felicia, thank you again so much for being here, for sharing your insights, your incredible energy. I do hope that we can pry you back as an ongoing guest now and again to help us all stay sane with numerology throughout our days.
Wonderful. I would really love it. So enjoy your birthday month.
Oh, thank you, Felicia. All right, listeners, until next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Empowered Within with Jennifer Pilates. Your feedback is important. It helps me to connect with you and gives me insight into who you are and what you're enjoying about the show. For today's show notes and discount codes from today's sponsors, head over to jenniferpilates.com. Until next time, may you live an empowered life from within.